boys and girls. So today we're going to be reading Chapter 7 of Night of the Spadefoot Toads by Bill Harley. On Monday morning, everyone's talking about Danny's party. It seems like the whole school was there. Ryan comes up to Ben right before the beginning of reading. "Why weren't you there?" Ryan asks. "You said you were coming." "I had to do something else," Ben says. "You promised." "I didn't exactly promise. I just had to go somewhere else." "Where?" Ben didn't answer. He wished Ryan would give up and go away. "Where'd you have to go that was so important? You said you were coming to the party." "I had to do some work for Mrs. Tibbets." "Mrs. Tibbets?" Ryan frowns. "Mrs. Tibbets, the teacher?" "Uh-huh." "What kind of work?" "Just yard work." "You worked for a teacher?" "What's wrong with that?" "She paid me more than I ever made for yard work before. Anyway, she'd already talked with my mom, and I couldn't get out of it." That seems to satisfy Ryan. He probably still feels hurt, but he goes back to his desk without asking any more questions. Ben is relieved. Ryan will forget all about Danny's party in a day or two, and things will go back to normal. At lunch, Ben sits down at a table across from Jenny. Before he can even take a bite of his pizza, though, Frankie comes over with his tray and glares at him. "You missed the party so you could go to Mrs. Tibbets' house," he says, making it sound like the dumbest thing he's ever heard of. Ben shrugs. Ryan sure didn't waste any time letting everyone know. So much for things getting back to normal. "Mrs. Tibbets is a loser," Frankie says. "What were you doing in her house?" Everyone at the table, even Jenny, is staring at Ben. He feels his face turning red. "She's okay," he mumbles. That's not what he wants to say, but who's going to admit that he likes a teacher and would rather be with her than skating with kids his own age? "Yeah, right," Frankie snorts. "She's okay if you like crummy teachers. She's old, and she's wacko." "She is not. She knows a lot," says Ben. "She knows a lot about science." "Then why's she teaching in that little room?" Frankie fires back. "It isn't even a real science room. They had to put her somewhere because they can't fire her. And if she's so great, how come Mr. Nickleby is always checking on what she's doing?" At first, Ben doesn't know what he's talking about, but then he remembers the principal coming in the room and confronting Mrs. Tibbets. He remembers Mrs. Tibbets sticking the frog in the principal's face. Frankie looks at him in disgust. "Well, Danny sure is mad. Instead of coming to his birthday party, you go and hang out with some old teacher." He rolls his eyes and heads toward another table. Jenny takes a bite of her sandwich. "If you ask me," she says with her mouth full, "Frankie's the one who's a wacko." A couple of kids laugh. Ben looks up and smiles at her. It won't solve his problems with Frankie, but it sure helps to have someone on his side. On the playground, Ben sits with his back against the brick wall, watching Frankie and Danny and a bunch of other boys playing basketball. Since Ben is big, kids are always asking him to play, but he doesn't really like basketball, especially not today. He knows he should say something to Danny about the party, but it's not going to be easy. As they all come up the walk after the bell, Ben catches up with him. "Hey, Danny, I'm sorry. I wasn't able to come to your party. I'm sorry, "Who cares?" Danny says, pushing past. Ben stands there on the walk as other kids rush around him. That evening, right after dinner, Ben asks his mother if he can call Toby. He wants to talk to somebody, especially somebody who doesn't live in Massachusetts. Toby answers the phone after only one ring. Ben can hear laughing and yelling in the background. "Hello?" Toby shouts. "Toby, it's me, Ben, Snake Man. Knock it off for a minute, guys," Toby says away from the phone. "I'm trying to talk here." Ben hears some scuffling, then Toby's voice again. "Hey, Ben, how are you?" "Okay," Ben says. Another round of loud laughing. "You should be here now," Toby yells. "Everybody's eating dinner here." Ben feels sick. "Great," he says. "Who's there?" "Josh and Bill. Oh, and Larry." "Larry? Larry Dunstan?" "Yeah, too bad you're not here." "But Larry's such a jerk." Ben feels terrible the moment he says this, but Larry had always driven him and Toby crazy. "No, he's okay now. We're on the same soccer team." "You're playing soccer?" Ben asks. Toby's never played soccer before. "Yeah, We had a practice this afternoon, and we're all on the same team, so my mom just brought us back here to eat. Ben hears another shriek in the background. His heart drops through his shoes. How's Lenny? He asks. Okay, eating and sleeping. Ben has had enough. Fine, he says. I guess I gotta go now. Me too. Talk to you later. Ben listens to the phone click. Everything stinks, he says to himself. Absolutely everything. He puts on his raincoat and takes a flashlight from the drawer in the kitchen. His mother is at the kitchen table working on some papers. She looks up. Where are you going? I just want to go out for a little while. In the back. His mother looks at him for a long moment. Okay, she says finally. Don't go out for too long, and don't go too far away. He slips out the back door and down the steps. The porch light shines out across the backyard. A fine mist is falling. Ben can barely feel it. It makes the air foggy and damp. He remembers someone saying that fog is just a cloud, low to the ground. He likes the idea of walking through a cloud. The light in the sky is fading, but it's not quite dark yet. He heads down the path through the woods, hardly aware of where he's going. I don't have a single good friend in Massachusetts, he thinks. My best friend is hanging out with a kid I can't stand. Everybody thinks I'm an idiot for going to a teacher's house. He walks until he reaches the marsh, where the trees open up a little and there's more light from the gray evening sky. They're already calling. Ben stands with his flashlight off, the sound of the breathing loud under his hood. His mind is racing in a million different directions. Peep, 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 peep. He takes a deep breath, lets it out, and listens. There are 3 or 4 calling, but it's hard to pinpoint exactly where the calls are coming from. The voices seem to hover in the air, filling the space over the marsh, almost more of a presence than a sound. More join in. They seem to call and answer each other, get closer and closer together in time, then join, calling each other. Then they separate again, singing back and forth, again and again. Ben stands transfixed, feeling like he's in a trance. He's in the middle of a huge living machine, a pulsing thing. The peeps are the heartbeat or motor. The engine of life. It surrounds him, calling out louder and louder. He forgets all about school and Frankie and Merle and Tuscan and Toby. A peeper sings close to his foot at the edge of a small pool of water. Ben bends over carefully without turning on the flashlight and sits back on his heels, waiting. His hands and feet are getting cold, but he doesn't move. The soft gray world is filled with the sound of the peepers, and then he hears a trill above the other sounds. It must be the American toads calling out, too high and steady a backdrop for his nearby peepers' song. He's afraid to turn on the flashlight, afraid he'll stop the music, afraid he might somehow stop the world. He strains to see in the growing darkness, trying to make out the little creature that is only inches away from him. It's no good, though. He can't see it. Finally, he points the flashlight towards the spot the sound seems to be coming from and switches it on. A circle of bright white lights shine on a tuft of grass. The singing continues. He keeps looking, but he can't see the peeper. The singing stops. Did it get away? He stares harder. Then he sees it, clinging with his tiny toes to a broad blade of grass. Its eyes sparkle in the light. Life pulses in its pale throat. Ben grips the flashlight in one hand, holding his breath. The peeper stays where it is. With his other hand, Ben reaches out, slowly, carefully, trying to get closer. Then he grabs for it. Gotcha, he said. He can feel its hind legs pushing hard against his palm. He drops the flashlight so he can cup the frog in both hands, and the beam of the flashlight shoots up into the darkening sky. He really can't see what he's doing, but he manages to get a hold of the peeper behind the hips so that he has it firmly, gently, between his thumb and finger. Then he picks up the flashlight and trains the light on the frog. The peeper has stopped struggling and seems to have calmed down. Its back legs are hanging down, its throat is moving in and out. And then, for a moment or 2, or maybe 10, he doesn't know how long, Ben studies the frog, holding it carefully between his fingers. He thinks about taking it to school. Ben! Ben, his mother's voice calls out through the night, over the sound of the frogs and toads, over the pounding of his heart. He opens his hand. For a moment the peeper just sits on his palm, then it springs out of his hand, out of the circle of light, back into the night. Ben turns the flashlight off, stands up, and listens. Ben! Coming, he calls, and he starts back. He doesn't turn the flashlight on. He knows his way home.